Two groups of soldiers faced off in the cramped basement tavern. The air was as tense as a guitar string. A slip of the tongue, and immediately, all eyes met. Then the first gunshot rang out, followed by a frantic barrage of bullets. Wine glasses shattered, tables and chairs collapsed. Within seconds, everything fell silent, leaving only gunpowder smoke and the metallic scent of blood in the air. Let's go back in time. This beautiful girl is named Shosanna. She is Jewish. When Shosanna was 18, she experienced a great tragedy in her life. At that time, German forces had occupied France and begun the purge of Jews in the occupied territories. Jews became targets hunted everywhere. Some were killed, others fled. Shosanna's family escaped thanks to a neighbor who sheltered them. In return, her family taught the neighbor how to raise dairy cows, but that very act revealed their whereabouts. At that time, Colonel Hans Landa had just taken his post. He was a brilliant executioner, nicknamed the Jew Hunter. Hans turned Shosanna's family, hiding under the floorboards, into literal rats. Her family was shot to death. Only Shosanna, being a little closer to an escape route, managed to avoid the Germans' bullets. Hans had intended to eliminate them all, but Shosanna ran too fast. Her feet seemed to have wings, and in the blink of an eye, she was out of the pistol's range. Hans paid no mind to Shosanna's escape, because in those circumstances, an empty-handed Jewish woman could hardly survive. But Shosanna was the exception. For years later, she appeared on the streets of Paris. Shosanna changed her name and identity, becoming someone else. She was now the owner of a cinema. All these years, Shosanna always bore the hatred of her family's annihilation. She swore to kill Hans to avenge her parents. In the grand scheme of things, Hans was a high-ranking figure in the Nazi Party. It was hard enough for an ordinary citizen to even know his whereabouts, let alone plan an assassination. Shosanna could only endure in silence amidst the streets full of Nazi soldiers, had to feign obedience and bide her time. She could not fail. That day, while changing a poster, Shosanna was approached by a German soldier. He steered every conversation toward movies and even offered to help. He was deliberately trying to get to know Shosanna. That soldier was Zoller. He stood at attention, formally introducing himself. Shosanna had no fondness for Germans. She packed up her things and closed the cinema. The first attempt at conversation was bluntly rejected, but that didn't discourage Zoller. He was even happy to have learned Shosanna's name and began his persistent pursuit. Zoller's pursuit made Shosanna uncomfortable, but she soon realized there was something different about him. The waiter hadn't even had a chance to greet Zoller before German officers were hastily putting down their glasses, smiling, and striking up conversations with him. Some even tried to ask for his autograph. Shosanna astutely realized Zoller was no ordinary soldier. And indeed, that was the case. Although he only held the rank of private, Zoller was a war hero in the eyes of the Germans, the most famous star soldier in Germany. In one battle, he had defended a tower for 3 days, single-handedly holding off an attack by 300 soldiers. On the first day, Zoller eliminated 68 enemy soldiers. On the second day, he shot down another 150. On the third day, he took down another 32, completely demoralizing the enemy. They retreated silently with their remaining remnants. Zoller boasted proudly of his glorious achievements, not noticing Shosanna's face growing colder and colder. If she were not Jewish, if she had not witnessed her family being murdered by the Nazis, perhaps Shosanna would have felt some admiration. But unfortunately, what happened could not be changed. The more heroic Zoller was, the more Shosanna hated him. She left in anger and returned to her small cinema to continue fixing the poster. But this time, 2 other German soldiers came looking for her. They had a very aggressive attitude. Shosanna tried to remain calm, stillness to counter motion. A single slip-up could expose her Jewish identity. Shosanna was taken to a party. As it turned out, Zoller's story had been made into a film called Nation's Pride, with Zoller himself playing the lead role. This film was to be widely promoted as an official Nazi film on a grand scale. Initially, the director planned to hold the premiere at the History's Kieper Cinema, but Zoller fervently recommended Shosanna's theater. Therefore, she was summoned for questioning. The director considered this film the greatest masterpiece of his life, allowing no room for error. Shosanna's cinema was too small, not meeting his requirements. But Zoller, wanting to win over his goddess, did his best to persuade the director. If there are few seats, just remove the French from the guest list. Invite only high-ranking German officers and famous figures from the film industry. That way the premiere will be even more prestigious. The director was convinced by Zoller. Just as he was about to arrange the next task, he noticed an important figure approaching. Shosanna turned her head to look and nearly revealed her panic. That person was her enemy, Colonel Hans Landa. The security for this premiere would be personally handled by Hans. The The fear and hatred for Hans were ingrained in Shosanna's very bones. When the director left, she also wanted to retreat immediately, but Hans called her back. Shosanna was forced to sit alone with Hans. She sat, her heart filled with anxiety and unease, fearing Hans would recognize her. Hans was the same as ever, as arrogant and boorish as he was 4 years ago. Perhaps because of her connection to Zoller, he didn't show excessive suspicion towards Shosanna. He was an extreme racist. After learning that Shosanna's projectionist was a black man, Hans immediately threatened her and suggested she fire him from the theater. If she couldn't do that, then on the day of the premiere, she would have to be the projectionist herself. The black man was absolutely not to appear at the theater. Shosanna shot him a furtive glare, her heart filled with rage. That black man was the person she trusted most, the only one who wholeheartedly supported her in her plan for revenge. Fire the black man? That was impossible. After Hans left, Shosanna finally couldn't maintain her composure and broke down, crying in silence. The next day, the director, on behalf of the film crew, came to inspect the theater and officially decided to hold the premiere there. After a day of careful consideration, Shosanna devised a perfect plan for revenge. She would gamble the entire cinema to take Hans's life. In the cinema's storage, there were over 350 reels of highly flammable nitrate film she had accumulated over many years. This material was more flammable than paper. A single spark could cause an explosion. If it burned with the cinema doors locked, no one could escape. But creating an explosion wasn't enough. Shosanna wanted a perfect revenge, a complete revenge lacking nothing. She wanted to make the Nazis taste the same fear she had experienced 4 years ago. With the help of the black man, she filmed a short movie herself. The film's title was A Face of Vengeance. During the Second World War, a legend spread through the German army about a ghostly creature called the Bear Jew. It would appear silently and kill German soldiers in silence, then scalp them and disappear as if it had never been there. Only one private has survived an encounter with the Bear Jew. The entire German army fell into a state of panic. Hitler was furious. His generals trembled before his wrath. In truth, there were no ghosts, just a group of American commandos. After the Normandy landings, the U.S. Army allowed Sergeant Rain to redeem himself by leading 8 Jewish American soldiers to infiltrate the French sector to conduct guerrilla warfare, creating psychological pressure on the German forces. The team had 3 key figures. First was Sergeant Rain. His nickname was the Bastard, ruthless, audacious, and never showed mercy. Before setting out, he gave each man a quota to collect 100 German scalps each. The second was the one who always carried a baseball bat, the Bear Jew, as large as a brown bear. He rarely showed himself, but when he did, he left no survivors. His mysterious movements earned him the name of a phantom. He especially enjoyed torturing and killing prisoners, using German soldiers' heads like baseballs to smash to pieces. Those 2 were still quite gentle. The one who terrified the German soldiers the most was the third, Hugo Stiglitz. Originally a German officer, but for some reason, one night he suddenly went mad, killing more than a dozen Gestapo officers at once. The strange thing was, after being captured, he wasn't immediately executed but was temporarily detained to be taken to Berlin for trial, perhaps to serve as a nationwide deterrent. The bastard heard of such a man in the fascist ranks and were thrilled. They all went to rescue him and recruit Hugo into the team. That day, the group captured a few German soldiers. The ones with guts were executed by the Bear Jew. The cowards were so scared they wet their pants. To save their own lives, they betrayed their comrades and gave Rain information and were promised a way to live. That soldier even offered a plan, showing Rain how to help him clear suspicion from his superiors, concealing his act of betrayal. Rain agreed. In front of Hitler, the soldier claimed that the squad only spared him to spread fear among the German army. But in reality, Rain was not that kind. He never spared a Nazi, especially those who intended to shed their uniforms to hide. Even if he let the soldier go, he had to leave him with an indelible mark. He cruelly carved a Nazi symbol onto the soldier's forehead, right in the middle. The bastard were so audacious that Hitler's hair was a mess from anger, but he still couldn't catch anyone. At the same time, the British also began to plot, coordinating with the Americans to launch an assassination operation. The target was the entire high command of the Nazi Party. A 3-person team sent by British intelligence secretly entered France and would then rendezvous with the bastard in the basement of a small tavern. They waited there for their contact. According to their superiors, a double agent would find a way to get them into the cinema during the premiere of Nation's Pride. In that cozy tavern, a beautiful woman was holding a cigarette. She had a high-bridged nose with sharp and captivating features. Her appearance exuded a calm, reserved quality, a charm that blended British and French styles. Her eyes were lively, whether she was talking or silent. Her face always held a bright, radiant smile. At this moment, Germany's most famous movie star, Brigitte von Hammersmark, was drinking and playing a guessing game with some German soldiers. One of them had just become a father today. His superior gave him a day off, so he invited some friends here to celebrate, and coincidentally met his idol, Brigitte. Brigitte was the double agent sent to support the British intelligence team. To avoid blowing her cover, she had to pretend she was waiting for a friend there. The British intelligence officers, thinking the place was safe, confidently stepped out. As soon as they appeared, the group was stared at by the 5 German soldiers. No one expected that Brigitte, who had majored in film and moonlighted as a spy, was not a professional. Due to her carelessness, the group of 4 fell under the enemy's watch. Fortunately, the British sergeant was disguised as a German officer, otherwise the whole group would have been exposed immediately. They pretended to be calm, sitting at the next table to drink. The British sergeant was anxious to leave, but Brigitte worried the German soldiers would become suspicious, so she wanted to wait a little longer. Brigitte's thinking was perfectly reasonable. It's just a pity that today that soldier was too happy, had too much to drink, and kept wanting to get friendly with Brigitte. He brought his glass over to ask for her autograph and also wanted to sit and drink with her. Brigitte handled the situation calmly, but the British sergeant couldn't keep his cool. He shouted, telling him to go back to his seat, making the atmosphere in the tavern turn ice cold. The soldier should have known to back off, but at that moment he was at his most reckless. Not only did he not back down, but he also said the British sergeant's accent sounded very strange. A Nazi officer sitting nearby had already noticed the commotion over here. When the soldier raised his suspicion, he immediately stood up and walked over. The Nazi officer wedged himself at their table. A life-or-death confrontation began. The officer wanted to find a flaw in the British sergeant. Brigitte tried her best to cover for him. The sergeant had already prepared for the worst-case scenario, quietly drawing his gun and aiming it straight at the German officer's groin. Brigitte quickly fabricated a story that the sergeant was her boyfriend and they were going to attend the premiere of Nation's Pride together. Coincidentally, this sergeant also knew a little about cinema, temporarily fooling the Nazi officer. But the trouble was that the British sergeant was too hasty in trying to get rid of him. He inadvertently revealed a flaw. A gunshot shattered the quiet atmosphere of the tavern. Sergeant Rain, hiding in the basement, jumped in shock. The plan had been compromised, and as the gunshots subsided, only the German soldier was left alive, holding a gun. Brigitte was seriously wounded in the leg, but still alive. The 2 sides were in a standoff. The soldier still had a weapon, but the exit was blocked by Rain. He couldn't escape. Rain could shoot him, but doing so would mean Brigitte wouldn't survive, and the plan to bring down the cinema would be cancelled. The situation forced both sides to negotiate. Rain proposed a trade of lives, 1 for 1. They would let him go if he let Brigitte go. The deal was successful. The soldier thought the crisis was over, so he lowered his gun and stepped out from his hiding place. Brigitte, from who knows where, pulled out a pistol and immediately fired another shot, finishing the soldier off. Rain got Brigitte away from the scene, but didn't treat her immediately. They suspected Brigitte had betrayed them. Rain pressed his finger into her wound to force her to tell the truth. Brigitte was in so much pain she hissed through clenched teeth. Finally, she revealed 2 pieces of information that should have been relayed. First, the premiere had been moved from the old theater to Shosanna Cinema. Second, Hitler himself would be attending. Rain was thrilled to hear this shocking news. 100 German soldiers couldn't compare to Hitler alone. He decided to replace the British sergeant to carry out Operation Kino. Poor Brigitte, seriously injured in the leg and still forced into battle. And so, time passed until the day of the premiere. On that day, the entire Nazi high command, the Bastard, and Shosanna's revenge plan all converged. 3 forces converging in one place, all set to explode at the premiere. Shosanna, she picked up a wine glass and quietly walked into the projection room where her black lover was hiding. The giant projector, the 2 lovers embracing passionately in the dark, celebrating the impending end. The lobby was packed with people. The entire Nazi high command was present. From above, Shosanna looked down, quickly recognizing the Nazi Air Force Marshal. And Hans, the man who had annihilated her family, was also standing on the 2nd floor with a wine glass in hand. He was like a hawk stalking its prey. This morning, he had gone to inspect the scene at the tavern where the spy was exposed and had found a clue. He had traced the British sergeant's identity, and at the scene, he found a woman's shoe and Brigitte's autograph. Based on these clues, he exposed Brigitte's identity as a spy. As soon as Brigitte entered the hall, Hans approached to greet her. Beside Bridget were three men in tuxedos. They were disguised as Italians, members of the Bastard. Hans began to mock Bridget's cast-covered leg, then continued to tease the three men's clumsy Italian. Bridget sensed something was wrong. She hurriedly tried to find a way to help the Bastard escape. Two members of the group, carrying time bombs, had already made it inside the auditorium. Before Bridget could even arrange for rain, she was dragged into a small room by Hans. Hans sat formally across from her. Then he patted his own thigh. "Come now, put your foot on my lap." A sentence full of insinuation and danger. Bridget couldn't guess what Hans was up to, so she had no choice but to maintain her elegant demeanor, placing her injured foot on Hans's lap, letting him untie her shoelace. She thought Hans was just an old lecher, but he only wanted to try the other shoe on her. Bridget immediately sensed danger, but before she could think of a way to react, Hans had her by the throat. A movie star, a double agent, just like that, died in silence. With a single phone call, Hans had his men in the auditorium act in unison, arresting Sergeant Rain. As Rain was being escorted to a car, he discovered that even the guards they had posted outside had been captured. A chill ran down his spine. Is the assassination plan still viable? Even Rain wasn't sure. What surprised him was that they weren't eliminated but were taken to Hans's office. Hans declared himself a double agent, one of Rain's people, and wanted to call his superior. Rain didn't believe him. "If we're on the same side, why did you arrest me?" More like a sudden change of heart. Now the tables had turned. He was the knife, and Rain was the fish. Rain had no choice. To live he had to do as Hans said. Just as Rain had predicted, Hans believed the Nazis were facing certain defeat. He betrayed Hitler and began to plan for his own future. After extracting information about the strike team from the traitorous soldier, Hans had devised his own escape plan. Hans called Rain's superior directly. He demanded that America recognize his status as a double agent, that he receive the salary of a lieutenant colonel and a house as an additional gift in exchange. Hans would let Shosanna's cinema explode as planned. Rain's superior agreed to Hans's terms and demanded that Hans ensure Rain's safety. Hans would take Rain near the American lines, then Rain would escort him to the Allied headquarters. Inside, the remaining forces also began to act. The two members of the Suicide Squad discovered Hitler was there. They silently placed the time bombs and then eliminated the guards outside the door. The black man, tasked by Shosanna, immediately locked the main doors. Then, he ran behind the screen, lit a cigarette, took slow drags, counting down to the beginning of death. In front of him were over 350 reels of flammable nitrate film. Meanwhile, the Nazi hero Zoller was watching the scene of his own slaughter, each shot felling a man, causing him to frown. He began to feel uneasy, feeling his actions were truly brutal. Zoller left his seat and went up to the projection room to find Shosanna. An unexpected situation. Shosanna felt uneasy, but Zoller insisted on entering the projection room. Shosanna had to let him in. Luckily, she was prepared. Shosanna told Zoller to lock the door. Zoller was thrilled, thinking Shosanna wanted to be intimate with him. Zoller turned his back without any caution. Shosanna seized the precious opening, pulled the gun hidden in her handbag, and shot Zoller 3 times, fatally. At that moment, the screen was still showing Zoller in a gunfight with the enemy. No one detected the gunshots in the projection room. Zoller's body collapsed to the floor. Heroes have always fallen for beautiful women. The hero in the eyes of all of Germany died at the hands of a beauty in a red dress. Shosanna suddenly softened. After all, Zoller had once been passionately in love with her. Shosanna turned Zoller over, wanting to see his face one last time. Who would have thought that Zoller would suddenly pull out a gun and shoot Shosanna back 3 times? As she fell, he gave her one more for good measure. What love? Shosanna had overestimated him from the start. The film reel continued to turn slowly. Shosanna's face appeared on the big screen. She proudly announced the Jewish plan for revenge. Behind the screen, her black lover threw his cigarette but onto the pile of film. In the blink of an eye, the entire theater burst into a sea of fire. The German officers panicked and fled, but the exits were blocked by the bear Jew and the fat one. The two stood blocking the way. No one could escape. Hitler, closest to the door, was shot to pieces like a sieve. At that very moment, the time bombs under the seats had just finished counting down. A loud boom erupted. The entire cinema was blown to smithereens by the shockwave. Shosanna and the Bastard team had both completed their assassination plans. On another front, Aldo Rain and Hans Landa approached the American lines to conduct the handover. Aldo handcuffed Hans and then carved a swastika on his forehead. So what if it was an order from a superior? A Nazi would not get away. Inglourious Bastard is a film that not only reenacts war with blood and violence, but also exposes the irrational nature of hatred. The desire for revenge becomes a driving force. The hypocrisy of military honor is twisted. Each character is a symbol of pride, indignation, and even despair. The film shows that in war, no one is truly innocent. No one is completely right or wrong. There are only people struggling in a bloody history. It satisfies us with the prospect of justice, but also reminds us that all revenge comes at a price, sometimes at the cost of one's soul. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this movie? Please comment down below.